My name is Hannah, and this is the House Party podcast from Ivory Innovations. We bring you the top entrepreneurs, researchers, and practitioners in the industry to shine a light on housing affordability solutions. On the show today, we have Aisha Weeks and Catherine Toner talking about the Dearfield Fund for Black Wealth and how they grew this from an idea in early 2021 into a $6 million fund with 170 homes closed by Black homeowners in Colorado and growing. The racial wealth gap in this country is staggering, and we see this front and center with the homeownership rates between white families and Black families. The median homeownership rate for white households is 72% and only 40% for Black households. That is why the Dearfield Fund for Black Wealth exists. The fund accelerates homeownership among Black families in the Denver metro area through an innovative down payment assistance product, structured in the form of shared equity. The fund is incubated within Gary Community Ventures, a Denver-based philanthropic organization with decades of experience launching successful ventures. I should also share that Dearfield was our winner in the finance category for the Ivory Prize this last year. So we are really excited to be chatting with them on the podcast today. We'll hear from Catherine a bit later on this, but Dearfield is especially different from traditional down payment assistance programs out there. Today we have Aisha Weeks, the Managing Director of the Dearfield Fund, and Catherine Toner, Managing Director of Impact Investing for Gary Community Ventures. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to get started with how you both got involved in this work. And Dearfield specifically. So, Catherine, I know you've been involved since the fund started in 2021, and you really helped shape the finance and operations of Dearfield. So tell us more about how Dearfield started and your role in that.
Sure. It's great to be with you and talking about this great product. So 2021, in the wake of George Floyd, our former CEO, Mike Johnston, and our current CEO and CIO, Santosh Ramdas, explored ideas about ways to bridge the racial wealth gap using housing as the focus, and in particular, home ownership. So it was kind of a nebulous idea as we began. I joined in February 2021, kind of when the idea of a fund had come to light, but the kind of implementation of what that actually looked like was still TBD. I have a background in investment banking and impact consulting, and so was able to dive into the nitty-gritty of what kind of a fund concept would look like on the home buyer and investor side of things. And so that's where it kind of started, and then got into a lot of detail on the legalese and the fund structure of Dearfield.
So about a year later, Aisha, you joined the fund in June of 2022, and your background is in community development and financial services. I'm curious what drew you to this work. Was there a moment or a story that you feel like really captures why you joined Dearfield?
Yes, thank you for that question. So I think to Catherine's point about just in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, the exposure of the racial disparities in our country, I think like a lot of people and organizations, there was a lot of soul searching that was happening, I think, around the country for how organizations and also individuals could really positively impact the issue that has been longstanding for decades and really centuries. So for me, the work that I was doing in financial services, as well as my work in community development, really I saw the gaps in access to capital and the kind of the carrot that we dangle in terms of, Community Reinvestment Act for financial institutions to create products, or incentivizing them to create products that work for low to moderate income communities, or even communities of color uniquely, just wasn't there. And in my opinion, wasn't working in the ways in which it should have. So to know that an organization such as Gary Community Ventures was really thinking this through, not from a public standpoint or a nonprofit in terms of charitable contributions, but really looking at investment, which is something that I believe, and the data show that the Black community as well as Black households have been denied investment. And so I was really drawn to this as a model, and understanding that we could prove the point here in Denver, and knowing that there's an opportunity for it to scale nationally was also exciting as well.
So I want to dig into the story behind the name Dearfield. And Aisha, you've shared with me a little bit about where the Dearfield Fund got its name, and that story being something that really drives the mission behind the fund. So what is Dearfield? Where does that come from?
Sure. Dearfield is a town located around 70 miles outside of Denver, Colorado. And it was the first Black homesteading community in Colorado. It was founded by a businessman turned farmer, O.T. Jackson, who believed that in order for Black people to really have a foothold in the American dream, that they needed to own property and own land. So the name Dearfield came from these fields will be dear to us, and really embodies the hope that families had as they came into this uncharted part of the country, with the hope of having ownership and agency over their lives. And so it's that belief in ownership as the pathway to the American dream and pathway to prosperity is channeling that dream and mission of those early settlers and the homestead in Dearfield.
Gotcha. That's great. So that was back in 1910. So I want to fast forward now back to 2021, and we heard a little bit from Catherine about your role in sort of figuring out the structure for the fund. You have a background in investment banking, so you're thinking about the financial model for this. And we understand at a high level that this is a down payment assistance product for Black and African American families in Colorado. I want to now kind of dig deeper into the details of how this fund is structured.
Cool. Should I dive in?
Just dive in.
Let's dive on in. So the fund itself is kind of two outwardly facing structures. One is on the home buyer side to shared appreciation product that is in the form of debt as a community second or a silent second mortgage alongside their primary mortgage. The Dearfield Fund provides up to $40,000 of down payment support at the outset. And throughout the period of home ownership or up to the point of refi, the home buyer pays no principal or interest on that amount. It's at the point of sale or refi that the home buyer or homeowner at that point repays the $40,000 and then just 5% share of the appreciated value of the home. And so it's a way to keep the fund sustainable and in a more kind of traditional private equity product, but it's a silent mortgage, a silent debt product on the back end for them in the home ownership journey. On the investor side, it looks a lot like a traditional private equity fund. So there are mission-aligned investors with Gary as the general partner of the fund, Gary Ventures Inc., our family office entity. We take in investment dollars and use those dollars to allocate those $40,000 amounts to home buyers that qualify according to the program criteria. And then repayment of the initial investment and a modest anticipated return comes from the repayment of the principal amount and the shared appreciation.
Gotcha. And for those maybe that aren't as familiar with how these products function, can you explain what a silent second mortgage is?
Sure. So a silent second really means that it just sits behind the first mortgage. It's silent because there's no requirement for interest or payments. And so it doesn't require the borrower to really interact with it at all during until the repayment is due.
Okay, I see. And so, there's a lot of other, maybe not a lot, but there are other down payment assistance programs that exist. We had one actually in our most recent top 25 cohort for the Ivory Prize, the California Dream for All Shared Appreciation Program. And so I mentioned in the beginning that this is different than traditional down payment assistance programs. So can you kind of walk us through like what are the specific aspects if you compare Dearfield to a traditional down payment assistance program, like what makes Dearfield distinct?
I come from it from a perspective of having been in financial services and having been on the lending side of things. And kind of just purely from a down payment assistance standpoint, if a family or borrower was not 80% AMI or below, then you wouldn't qualify for traditional down payment assistance. There was always a focus really on income and not really on the historic lack of your ability to build generational wealth, which is preventing you from having an asset or a down payment, right? And so it was pretty much an income focus. For the Dearfield Fund, we're looking at max of 140% of area median income, which is includes those who are considered middle class. And I always say that you can be middle class on paper, but it doesn't mean that you've had the opportunity or your family has had the opportunity to be able to amass savings that allow you to purchase that first asset. And so if you don't have that, how are you then onboarding to the home ownership journey if you don't have like that grandma or that auntie to be able to cut you a check? And so the traditional structure of down payment assistance has always kind of been a low to moderate income aspect. And so for me, that's one of the main differentiators of the structure of our down payment assistance. Catherine, would you like to jump in?
I'd say the kind of broad availability of down payment assistance at the kind of the quasi state agency level, for example, is very much a grant or a smaller dollar amount that provides that support. And I think because we're able to structure this down payment as a shared appreciation product, as probably the other cohort member has, it's you're able to provide a larger dollar amount that's meaningful in the total down payment dollar amount, closing costs, et cetera. And it's more scalable. So because there is a modest return and the kind of program related investors expect a lower rate, but there is repayment there. So as an alternative to a grant, there's scalability in the model.
Okay. So it sounds like the income restrictions are not quite as there's different types of income requirements for Dearfield than you might see with a traditional program. The actual amount of down payment assistance that you're able to provide is larger than traditional programs. And then kind of the scalability, given that it's a shared appreciation model, is also different. And you mentioned, Catherine, the program related investment piece. And I know that PRI equity is also something that makes this innovative. So can you talk about what PRI equity is and kind of how that's worked into this?
Sure. So without diving completely into the IRS tax code, program-related investment is an investment that counts for a foundation toward the 5% that foundations are required to distribute in grants or other charitable activity in a given fiscal year. And traditionally, that's been on the debt side. It's very easy to measure kind of what percentage of a coupon or an interest rate is below market relative to where the Fed funds rate is, et cetera. Equity PRIs are also program-related investments. They contribute to the charitable purpose, but because it's equity, investors are just now getting comfortable with really defining what the charitable purpose of that investment is upfront, and then the ongoing reporting that is required to maintain and kind of connect that charitable purpose to the investment on an ongoing basis. There's increased comfort with that. And that is the primary mechanism for investors coming into Dearfield. We also have a structure called a PRI debt aggregator fund for those that are not comfortable with that. We've partnered with a fiscal sponsor that is the equity member, and then they facilitate debt investments on the back end. So we have kind of a dual mechanism for accepting investment dollars based on kind of where different investment committees or boards are and their comfort level in doing equity PRIs. But our hope is that Dearfield and similar investments become kind of a standard that increases comfort with equity PRIs, because that broadens the asset base that investors can use to advance their charitable purpose.
Gotcha. So it sounds like there are a couple different kind of avenues through which, if investors are interested in providing capital to the fund, they have different ways of doing so.
Yeah, and it all goes back to establishing upfront and then tracking the alignment of the charitable purpose of the organization with the outcomes that Dearfield's producing.
One thing that I would also like to add, as far as the differentiator for Dearfield's down payment assistance in terms of our fund versus others, is really our wraparound services. So on the programmatic side as well. And so from my experience, you have on the pre-purchase side, a lot of organizations such as HUD certified counseling agencies that are really good with the goal of getting folks into a home. But when it comes to the post-purchase side of things, in terms of maintaining the home and building it as a generational asset, there's really a gap in the market as it relates to that. And so we are really proud that we are looking at it from a comprehensive wealth building standpoint. So looking at homeownership as that asset that you can use to onboard into your wealth journey, but also looking at what is a Black wealth playbook look like in terms of the pillars that you need to have implemented to ensure that you're holding on to the asset. One of the things that really informs the work that we're doing around this is that the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland has done a lot of research on the racial wealth gap, and they have noted that yes, homeownership is a great vehicle to closing that gap. But where Black families really kind of fall into an issue is that we're not able to hold on to that asset long enough to be able to benefit from its appreciation and ownership over time, the same as white families. And so we understand that there might be macroeconomic issues as well as household level issues that will lend itself to a family losing the home. And so we are walking side by side with them year over year, ensuring that we're doing everything that we can to help them to retain the home so that they can truly benefit from the ownership.
Wow. So it sounds like there's there's a lot of innovation happening on the finance piece. There's also the differentiation around like the wraparound support services that you're providing to ensure that there's sustainability with that home ownership. And I think a third piece that feels really innovative about Dearfield is how Dearfield is centering race in a very upfront way. And I'm curious, maybe Aisha, since you're involved very much so in kind of the day-to-day and the fundraising, what's been the experience in fundraising and kind of having those conversations around race being such a core piece of the mission of this fund?
I think it has been quite interesting kind of going out and raising a fund that centers Black wealth and centers Black families. We know that what the data show, but talking to investors about kind of like making the case or building the case for, that yes, this is a historic issue that we're seeking to address. And also, I think it's unique that when you are doing that, because not only are we centering Black families, but we're also raising concessionary capital, it becomes like an interesting pool or mix of investors who are impact oriented, who are mission aligned, as Catherine had mentioned earlier, and those that are saying that we understand the fund's goal of dialing down returns to increase impact, and then that the majority of the upside being with families, because we could have structured it in a very different way where the fund kind of took a larger share of the appreciated value, right? But because we wanted to center wealth creation, we were really intentional intentional about structuring it in that way. And so that kind of like has a funnel there with those that are foundation that have that charitable purpose, that are able to use their PRI dollars to invest. But I would say for me, what has been the most impactful has been the high net worth individuals who, are taking the wealth that they have amassed in this, system that has denied others the ability to do so. And they are coming to the table saying that I understand this is how I gained my wealth, and I would like to invest to be able to close the racial wealth gap for others, right? And so for me, I kind of feel like, foundations are great, and we obviously know that they are sitting on very large coffers in terms of their ability to invest. But I think it really resonates when an individual, a person is saying, I've sat and I've thought about it, and I really want to have an impact in this way. To me, that's been kind of like the most impactful experience in terms of working with those investors, through their donor advised funds, their DAFs. And so that has been encouraging for me in terms of this long haul of fundraising that we still have to go. Our goal is 20 million. We've raised 10 million so far and deployed around 6. So we're halfway there, but that is the piece of it that really is both encouraging to me.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, as you've gone through the fundraising journey thus far, and as you said, you have more of the journey to come, has the story that you've told about Dearfield kind of shifted at all? Or have you, as you've gotten feedback or questions and concerns from these, folks or foundations that you're talking to about this opportunity, like, have you had to change how you talk about the impact or the story, or has it kind of remained pretty consistent?
I think for us, it's been an evolution, which is really interesting because, we focus obviously on wealth creation. But the more that I dove into the fund and really just began to think about all of the ways that we're providing impact, we're not just helping to build wealth, but we're creating household financial stability as well. When you look at markets such as Denver, and this is not unique to Denver, it's happening around the country as well, where you have displacement happening because of the rapid rise in rental costs. And you have families that would otherwise be stable, but for this occurring. And then also you look at a state like Colorado that doesn't have any laws against a landlord being able to just increase your rent an exponential amount. And how is a family going to navigate that, right? And so we look at homeownership in terms of a stabilizing vehicle. And so that has an economic impact, not only for that family, but for city, states, and for the country as a whole, right? And so if we can keep families stable, keep children in a home, keep them in the same school, same community, same network, we're really providing economic stability for the families as well. And so I've leaned into that narrative just because it is true, right? We're building wealth, but we're also creating stable homes and stable communities in that way. And one other thing that I highlight now, since we've done an analysis of our portfolio and we found that 60% of our portfolio are women, I was really encouraged by that as well, to say that we're focused on, racial equity, but also when you look at it from a gender lens investing perspective, those that may focus more on women, that this is also an investment opportunity for them as well if they're focusing on gender lens investing. So really leaning into those two narratives in addition to the impact that we're having on wealth creation.
Wow. Yeah, that's fantastic. And really interesting also to as you continue to fundraise, be able to incorporate kind of the impact that you're seeing from the people, you've already deployed some of the capital. And so be able to see what the impact has been and the demographics of who, what those folks look like and kind of what their experience is. So that's really cool that you're able to sort of, the story can evolve as those individual family stories come out.
I think that's one reason why we were lucky to be in an institution like Gary that has a family office and private foundation structure, where otherwise the headwinds in doing this type of fund structure are are overwhelming. And so the ability to do this and structure this and kind of build the plane while we fly it to get that data, to understand the impact that we're having and be able to kind of create a positive feedback loop to demonstrate that we think it's working. We think it's empirically working. And there's a demand for the product, there's product market fit. And we also have investment dollars to kind of kick it off and structure it. I think this might parlay into some of the conversation about scalability, but our objective really was to absorb those transaction costs up front, provide that investment, initial investment capital, bring a couple of anchor investors along, like the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and then be able to demonstrate that impact and build that track record.
Yeah, no, it's a really powerful and compelling approach for doing something like this. And you're right, I would love to talk about scalability. And, I think something that we've talked about before is sort of like the vision and idea of how Dearfield can serve as a model for other regions and maybe be replicated elsewhere. So like what does that, or what do you think that should look like? Is this like a state level solution that all 50 states adopt? Is this something the federal government should be taking on and implementing across the US? Like what should the future of this look like?
Aisha, you're in charge of the future.
Okay, I am in charge of the future. No, I think we've received incredible interest thus far, even prior to my coming on board and during the time that I've been the managing director for a little over a year now. We've had folks in markets such as Seattle, Philadelphia, Minneapolis, folks around the country who are interested in the model because the racial wealth gap doesn't just exist in Colorado or Denver Metro. It's a national issue. So I think that the fact that we're reaching out, but also those other entities around the country are saying like, hey, we're interested, how can we partner? So as a part of our goals is really to create a community of practice and also think about identifying other markets and anchor institutions that we could potentially partner with to be able to replicate the model around the country. And also, so replicating the model is one, so that's obviously super important, but we also, as I mentioned about the Black Wealth Playbook, really wanting to kind of like peel back fly open the curtain in terms of those key pieces that need to be implemented, right? So a lot of times information is passed from one generation to the other from at the dinner table, right? Those conversations that are just kind of like happen organically, and there are communities that don't benefit from the dissemination of that. And so wanting to build that and then share it nationally is also a part of our goal. So not just replicating the fund, but also the models and the pillars for wealth so that it can be deployed across the country and we can see the same type of benefits and impact that we have in Denver Metro. We can see it around the country as well.
Catherine, anything to add on that future vision?
I think, the objective of incubating this within Gary is very much not to keep it in Colorado. In the same kind of landscape and headwinds of an individual trying to start this fund, our objective is to have absorbed all of the transaction costs for actually structuring the legal piece. It's established as a special purpose credit program based on the historic and demonstrated. And Aisha mentioned earlier the Cleveland Fed, like all of the data that we know exists in redlining and barriers that were intentionally put up to prohibit Black wealth creation and growth. I think all of those pieces assist in that replication. We know each of the entities that need to be put in place, the fact that there needs to be an anchor institution in those respective geographies to really drive the operations of a given fund and the partnerships that need to be created in order to make that successful. And I think Dearfield is still very much a pilot. Like, as I mentioned, we're flying the plane as we're building it, or vice versa. But the objective is to kind of have the track record there, so that scalability and the acquisition of the model by other folks is realistic.
Gotcha. Yeah. So if for people that are listening to this episode and are excited about the model, from live in a different state other than Colorado and want to do something similar, what are like the first two things they should do? Is it like identify like an anchor institution to sort of be the sponsor and kind of run the ops for this? Should they reach out to you guys? Like what people that are excited about this and want to bring it to their home market, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think having number one would be having an anchor institution. I think it needs to live somewhere, and it needs to be driven out of a singular entity or person. And then I think understanding the investable landscape. We did a lot of modeling to understand kind of the appreciation historically in Colorado, what that looks like conservatively to make sure that the model works here in Denver Metro, and then the kind of quantum of investment dollars that would be required to show that track record and that product market fit. Having those lending partners, we partnered with First Bank as our kind of anchor mortgage lending institution, and they were critical in kind of being open to an innovative model and structuring something alongside us. We work with Impact Development Fund here in Denver, which is a fiscal sponsor that does a lot of the admin, so that the kind of the burden is not built out in a full fund structure. It's kind of it's creatively dispersed along the entire value chain while also integrating into more traditional mortgage lending practices, and then making sure that there's investor capital, that there's interest in supporting Black wealth and Black wealth creation, and a buy-in to the model, which is really building wealth alongside families, as Aisha eloquently described. Like all of the wraparound services are critical to that wealth creation, and so the entire model there needs to be kind of structure and support for. But Aisha, interested in what you see on there too.
No, that's a really, you hit on all the points, Catherine. That's excellent, and I want to hone in on one of them, which is understanding the housing market in the city, because originally from New York City. It's a very different market in New York City versus where I worked in community development in Cleveland, Ohio, in the Midwest, in the Rust Belt, state. And then comparing it to Denver, Colorado, right? And so understanding the model, part of that, why it works is the modeling of appreciation year over year, and knowing that you have a strong market and based on historics, and then also kind of like updating that year over year as we move forward. But you have markets where housing is still rebounding from the 2008 foreclosure crisis, right? And so understanding the strength of those housing markets, whether the appreciation that you're seeing from a historic standpoint, and understanding that there may be some tweaks that need to happen given what the data is showing you about the historics of your appreciation in your market, I think is really important to evaluate as you're kind of looking at what model would fit in different areas around the country.
Okay, so it sounds like sort of three things. One is identifying where this will live, whether it's, ideally some kind of anchor institution for that to be the home. Learning about the kind of the landscape, both the housing market and also the investor landscape. Like what is the interest from the investor community in this kind of product? And then finally identifying the right lending and fiscal partners to really kind of kickstart this thing and get it moving.
Yep, you got it.
Sounds easy.
Yeah. Right, just do all that. Just do all that.
And then you're good to go. So I want to, for my last question here, zoom out a little bit and talk about what else you both think needs to be happening to address the racial wealth gap. Because Dearfield, the model is just one piece of the puzzle. So I would love to hear from both of you. what else is missing in the ecosystem? What are the opportunities? What else needs to be done?
I think for me, from like you said, there's an entire ecosystem. When you think about all of the elements that are really driving the racial wealth gap, you can look at income and income disparities, right? In terms of one of the main drivers, access to capital, which is where Dearfield is fitting into, but we're on the down payment assistance side. There is a reckoning that needs to happen with the mortgage system in general. Some of the things that we've uncovered are, issues with the way in which student loans are still preventing low to moderate income households from being able to qualify for first mortgage, for very arbitrary treatment of what that payment needs to look like, right? And it's really causing disparities in terms of access. Then, if someone gets into a home and then on the back end, we have discrimination happening in the appraisal system, there needs to be a reevaluation and an overhaul. And I know that the federal government, the president is looking at what needs to change. He has a whole PACE initiative looking at that as well, in terms of how do we create access for more African-American, Black individuals, as well as just people of color, more broadly, to become an appraiser, right? It's very much an apprentice type of structure. And then it becomes this generational access even into that industry. And it does have ramifications. Even looking at the audit system and the tax system, realizing and recently being released that Black families are kind of disproportionately called for an audit, and what that means in terms of like fees and penalties and all of that, and thinking about what kind of needs to change in these systems where you have a lot of things that are codified and haven't really been brought out to light. So when you look at all of the things that kind of impact someone's finances, the family economic structure, as well as access to capital, the tax system, policy, right? It's like we have to operate simultaneously in all of these different areas. Otherwise, gains in one, such as access to capital, could be eroded if we're not working on all the other components kind of flow into that as well.
Right.
I'd just say from the broader Gary Community Ventures perspective, and I oversee our family economic mobility investments on the endowment side, and funky financial structures like Dearfield, but we're thinking about this in other spaces, and our lens is very much how do we increase families' income, decrease expenses, and increase assets. And Dearfield fits squarely in the ownership side of things, but we're trying to figure out ways in reducing the racial wealth gap of employee ownership, which disproportionately in manufacturing companies employ people of color. How do you elevate folks into positions of management so that kind of equity creation is a part of kind of the everyday activity of going to work? How do you create and support investment portfolio's and grow alongside the stock market if home ownership isn't the right choice for that family? And then we're also piloting in Colorado concept of tenant equity. So how can you your normal rental cash flows every month contribute to an equity appreciation or an equity stake that provides that at least emergency savings for families that we know is essential? And then how does that grow over time when you as the renter are contributing to the property value of the property that you're renting in? So trying to think through different ways where the traditional financial structures, as Aisha described earlier, that have created these disparities, how do you integrate families at the center of those structures to bridge those gaps that were created over time?
Great. Wow. I love both of your responses, because I think, Aisha, you highlighted so much of the work that still needs to be done, given a lot of the inequities that are baked in, not only into real estate and homeownership, but also the tax system and sort of all of these other elements that we need to be thinking about as we're focusing on solving inequities in one area. And then Catherine, you touched on sort of the work that Gary is doing right now to address some of those things. So very exciting and inspiring to hear that. I think we'll end there. Thank you both so much for joining us today. It was awesome to learn more about Dearfield and the impact that Dearfield is having. We're excited to see how this continues to grow.
Thanks for having us, Hannah.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Tune in next week to hear from two brothers that are bringing together technology, predictive analytics, and financial modeling to help real estate professionals source and evaluate deals faster, ultimately driving down development costs and improving affordability. That's all for today. Thanks for listening to House Party with Ivory Innovations.